Welcome to Fully Armed, you guys. Glad you're hanging out with us today. Got a great episode today. I've got my friend Jim Beavers, and as you'll tell pretty quickly, we've been friends for a long time, written a lot of songs together, been through a lot together. And what I mean by you'll tell pretty quickly is you can tell right off the bat as I introduce him that I am poking at him pretty good right off the bat. So, hit songwriter Jim Beavers. You guys enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Fully Armed Podcast with Chris Hennessee. You got your armor on?
All right, guys, welcome to Fully Armed with what? You're going to...
I'm ready.
I'm doing my promo.
I know. I love the
welcome to
intro.
Fully Armed with Chris Hennessee. I have Brett Beavers on the show with me today, and I'm
Brett Beavers. Did you do that on purpose?
Yeah,
no, you didn't.
Of course I did.
You know, one of my publishing companies is one word. Don't call me Brett Music.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, for everybody at home, I'm a songwriter, and my older brother is also a songwriter, and his name is Brett.
Hold on. I don't think we've officially said that this is Jim Beavers.
Now we're saying it.
Okay.
And you just called your podcast guest by the wrong name.
Songwriter Jim
on purpose,
Beavers.
I hope.
And as you folks probably have already figured out, Jim and I have been Virgos
for a long time.
Friends for a long time. And so he's on here, and I give him a hard time right off the bat. I'm just double checking everything's looking good. It's looking good, Jim. Welcome to Fully Armed.
Fully armed. I am fully armed. I've got both of them with me today.
Well, I knew you would bring both arms. This welcome to the this is Judy, aka the armored car that you
Why do you call
into.
her Judy?
I'm glad you asked. I'll tell you why. Because the lady that I bought this 2006 Winnebago from is named Judy, and we were like, well, what are we going to call this thing? And I was like, man, that lady was so sweet. We're going to name this thing. We christened it Judy.
So you called me Brett, I hope, as a joke. I can't tell. I think you were recovering.
Okay.
And we introduced me as Jim.
Yeah.
Do you know what my mom's name is?
No.
Judy.
Is it really?
Yep.
Judy Beavers.
Judy Beavers. And my dad's name is Harry.
What a segue. I played golf with you and Harry one time.
Harry Beavers.
And he...
That's for you. It's true. Fact.
And he beat us both, to my recollection.
And
that day.
We were talking the other day. You don't hear any young girls named Judy anymore. It's kind of aged out, but it'll come back. It's a good name.
James, or are you Jim?
James. I'm James. Are you Christopher? Or
I'm
Chris?
Christopher.
Yeah.
Yes. Steadfast follower of Christ is apparently.
I'm James Matthew. Both biblical names.
Wow.
James Matthew, Job, Malachi, Hosea Beavers. Isn't that interesting?
Hosea?
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. Man, we have lost him already. All right, if we can...
We never had him.
You're right. So it's interesting that we won't go into it yet, but you chose a verse from Matthew to be the verse that we talked about.
I did. So,
Texas native Jim Beavers from the great area of...
Texas.
So tell me about how you feel about Texas secession in the coming years.
Is this going to happen? I mean, I will. You know what? Literally, since I've ever been alive, I've heard people talk about Texas seceding.
Yeah.
And 99% of us that talk about it is a complete joke.
Yeah.
But there are those who actually want to do it, and I think they're misguided.
I did not really mean to go there right off.
But there are people who actually believe.
There are.
For a lot of reasons. The main reason is Texas, I believe, is the only state that was its own sovereign nation before becoming a state, right? Because it
makes sense, right?
The Republic of Texas.
Yeah.
And so they, think there's something way back there in the Constitution that gives them the right to do that, and they want to do it, and, they think they're big enough and populated enough to sustain themselves, and, we'll see what happens. I'm sure a lot of other states would be fine with it if Texas left, but I don't know.
Well, Tennessee and Texas have this old school connection, so I feel like we're akin, for that.
In fact, my original family that migrated to Texas are from Lebanon, Tennessee.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, my grandfather's grandfather.
I didn't know that.
Lebanon, Tennessee, died in a mudslide on the Cumberland River.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Yeah. So
all these years, I never.
I know.
Knew
Yeah,
that.
it's
That's
fact.
interesting.
Yep.
A mudslide.
The Trice family, and if you go out to Lebanon, you'll see lots of streets and roads with the word Trice in it. So that's my mother's maiden name.
Man.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, so, and of course, I know some information about you, but you moved to Nashville in the early 90s, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did you move to Nashville for just random reasons, or did you want to do music?
I knew I wanted to be in the music business. I grew up loving country music. I grew up playing guitar and banjo and all that, played in bands in college. I just knew I wanted to be in a business. I didn't know exactly what yet.
Yeah.
But I knew Nashville was where that was happening, and so I just knew that my life would be here in some shape or form.
Baylor, right?
Yeah, I went to Baylor.
Yeah. And your son's at Baylor.
My
now,
son
right?
goes to Baylor. My dad went to Baylor, and my
wow.
granddad went to Baylor. So my son's a fourth generation Baylor kid.
I did not
He's
know
there
that.
right now. Yeah.
Wow.
See,
So
you learned a lot about me.
You did. Were you in a band? You played some music and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. Sons of the Desert was the name of the band. Do you remember that band? This is not a joke.
I thought we were talking about high school. Like,
No, I played in a band in high school called the Wambatusas.
see,
Yeah.
okay, now
Yeah.
now we're getting
That
to
was
where
a good. That
what
was
I'm
a
talking
good
about.
one.
If you were to guess,
Yeah.
what would have been the first band, the first song the Wambatusas ever played in their first show? Just, I know you probably don't remember exactly, but if you were just guessing,
Well, I could probably. We played Johnny Be Good at the high school event.
and that was probably a fairly new song at that point in time. So you guys were doing. See,
No, it was not. It came out in the 50s, but
okay.
with Back to the Future, remember when he plays Johnny Be Good?
yeah, I do.
I think that's what made us want to
That
do
was
it.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Great scene. Wambatusas
Wambatusas.
with a B.
With a B.
Okay. Well,
I don't know what that word came. I don't know what it means. I don't know where it came from. One of my friends said it, and we liked it. And, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was about to ask if there was a chance, like, you know how Tom Petty did Mud Crutch,
Yeah.
a reunion for his old high school band. Is there any chance, do you feel like, that we could?
Probably not.
Okay. All right. Well, just wondering.
Unfortunately.
So when you move to Nashville, you're going to be a hit songwriter, right? No?
No, you're wrong, Chris. Why would you say something
okay.
like that?
What were your plans? What was the deal?
Well, I had it in my brain that I wanted to work at a record company and maybe one day run a record company. I was kind of enamored with record labels and the business of music at that time.
Yeah.
Although I was a musician and a amateur at home by myself songwriter, it just never entered my mind. I didn't have any interest in being an artist or pursuing any of that stuff. I wasn't good enough either. But I just thought the business side is where I belonged, and a lot of that was because I went to college, dag nabbit.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I got to do something with that degree.
Business
I can't
degree?
just So my first job in town was at Capitol Records in the mailroom. I finally got a job after working for free for a while.
Okay, hang on. So literally, like a movie, you come in and they're like, you can work in the mailroom.
I was interning at some places for free, and then I heard about the job at Capitol, and got that job.
Do you think they still have mail rooms at record
It's not
labels?
like it was, because then we were literally still, every time a single was out, we were stuffing envelopes with cassettes or CDs and mailing them to the radio station.
Oh, so yeah,
literally
a lot to
So
that.
we had 3 full-time mailroom employees.
Wow.
And I was making $15,000 a year, and it was the happiest I'd ever been to get
How
a
about
job.
that?
I'm not kidding. That was the happiest I've ever been to get a job.
That's
I could
awesome.
not believe I got to work at Capitol Records with that little logo that I'd seen on Merle Haggard records, Beach Boys records, Frank Sinatra records.
Yeah.
It was cool to me.
That's so when I first moved to town, like the day I got to town, I didn't have nothing. And I parked at ASCAP because you know how on 16th and 17th, ASCAP's like the first spot.
Yep.
Well, I didn't know what ASCAP even was, but I knew that it was Music Row, so it's probably got something to do with music. I'm going to park in their parking lot. And I started there, and I went to door, down 17th, over to 16th, all the way back down to my That's a long,
It is.
I did that in August 98.
That was hot, too.
And it was
probably.
hot, and I was carrying my manila folders with me that had my headshot and a cassette tape and a bio. And I had just my arms full of them. And I would go up and knock on doors, and people would be like, I live in this house. Oh, okay. So you're not accepting any
So
material.
it wasn't even necessarily a business. You were
It
just
didn't matter. I didn't know. I would just go knock on doors.
you thought every place was a place you could give your songs to.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, we've heard crazier stories.
So the reason I say that, you're talking about the logo when you said that, like with Universal and stuff. I would see different stuff like RCA as I walked down through there, and just like BMG, and I'm like, wow, man.
I know.
They didn't let me in
for
some reason, but they let you in the mailroom.
Well, I had to work.
You did have to work.
Yeah.
So I'm super interested how that goes from working at the label. How far up the ranks of the label did you get?
A job came open in the finance department that I took because it was the first job to get me out of the mailroom, and I ended up working there for about 5 or 6 years in the finance department. And I started realizing in my brain, at least, that I think I was in the wrong part of the business at that point. I learned a ton, which is great, and it's helped me a lot in other areas of my life and career. But it was just very obvious to me I was misplaced at that point.
Right.
Yeah. So quickly, just the career short bio after that. I tried my hand at management for a while with an artist buddy of mine that got a record deal. That didn't really go very well. And then a high school friend of mine named Leanne Womack, who most people may know.
Hold on. Did you go to school with Leanne?
Yeah.
Did you really?
Mm-hmm.
In Texas?
Yeah. She lived in Jacksonville, Texas, which is where I went to high school. And we knew each other a little bit. I knew she was into country music and stuff, and my dad had given me a 45 she had done. And anyway, so, 10, 12 years later, we're both in Nashville. She gets a record deal. And so I went out on the road with her for a while as a road manager, just because I needed a job.
Yeah.
And then I ended up working with her for a while. And I ended up playing on the road with her, playing guitar. So, if you look at it from 30,000 feet, I go from music is fun in college and high school, and it's just what I do, and it's what I like to do. Then all of a sudden now I'm on the business track, but then I kept kind of moving my way over toward the music track.
So in that scenario, you end up with a guitar in your hand.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads.
And I was like, man, this is a lot more fun than 9 to 5 at the label.
And so that band, I got to circle back around to Leanne's band, that was a smoking band, and actually we got a very good mutual friend in that band, which was Mike Waldron.
I wouldn't go that far, but Mike Waldron was in that band.
So Wally, and I always tell this, it's one of the first studio things that I did when I first moved to town was with Wally at his studio and his little place, and there was a picture that was on the wall that's one of my favorite pictures, and it.
I know what you're talking about.
It's you meeting Mike Waldron. No, it's not.
It's the other way around.
Right. It's just you guys hanging out, and it's a picture of you shaking his hand, and it says what?
Right. It says the day I got to meet Jim Beavers was the caption.
And it's hanging on his wall.
Yeah, and of course I gave it to him. And for the uninitiated, it would look like he had framed this photo of meeting me and thought that it was that important.
That's before I knew you, actually. And I'm like, man, you got to meet Jim.
You're like, who's Jim Beavers?
I just thought that was great. But what a great
band.
By
the way, who's Jim Beavers is one of my the payoff to one of my favorite truthisms / jokes about the music business. There are 4 stages to a songwriter's career.
Yeah, okay. What's that?
Do you know this?
I don't. No, I'd love to hear.
Okay, stage 1, who's Jim Beavers?
Yeah.
Stage 2, man, I kind of like Jim Beavers.
Yeah.
Stage 3, find me another Jim Beavers.
Yeah.
And then stage 4 is, who's Jim Beavers? Right?
Yeah. That's it.
Those are the stages. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm in stage 4.
If you're lucky.
Those
are the stages.
You're right.
Yeah.
So the band, back to your point, Mike Waldron, Dave Dunsey, Kevin Adams, Randy Smith, Rusty Danmeyer, Joe Manuel was in that band for a while.
Oh, man.
And I did not belong musician-wise in the same group as those guys because they are and were just a phenomenal band, and I was just lucky to be – I had a lot of imposter syndrome playing with them, but I played acoustic, and I think I held my own. But they're true musicians.
Great, it really great.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, you're Jim. Wally, Mike Waldron's now playing. Man, he's doing like Luke Combs sessions and playing guitar on those, and of course, the bass player was your brother, right? And
Yep.
he did a bunch of production.
He played a while with Leanne.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a lot of. It was just a great band. I remember that.
Her
that
the
bunch.
Leanne Womack, family tree is filled with some pretty talented people. She was a very not demanding in a bad way, demanding in a good way. Like she demanded high caliber musicians.
Yeah.
A lot of artists, how good are you and are we a great band is fifth or sixth down the list. It's more like, do they look young? Do they make me look cool? Do I like riding a bus with them? But she was able to get and demand great players, and that's a good testament to her. She loved Bob Wills and Strait and those people Merle Haggard, who wanted great bands and had them.
And I got to say, just as a disclaimer, I've been around Leanne just a handful of times, and she's just great, man.
I'd stack her up against any country singer.
Needless to say,
ever.
vocally and as a performer, but just man, such a sweetheart and like just straight up cool,
Yeah.
So I got to go to my next. I'll set this up by this. I've known Dirks for 25 years. I know you've known him for a long time too. And so when Dirks and I used to do open mics at the same time at Broken Spoke or Bluebird and that kind of stuff. So I knew him, and then all of a sudden I'm hearing, man, Dirk's got a record deal, Capitol. That's awesome. We're excited about it. Man, Dirks has a single out. Now Dirks has another single. So you get the record, and I'm looking at it, and he's writing all these songs with these songwriters, and then there's this Writer X.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who the heck is Writer
Right.
X? So I'll go back to your four things, about songwriters. I'll start with number one. Who's Writer X?
Yeah. That's a good segue. You ought to do podcasts. That was good.
Yeah.
So Writer X was me at the time. That was 20 years ago. And kind of as my strategy for transitioning from being a guy who worked on the music business to being a guy who wrote songs, I was a little self-conscious about, Jim Beavers, the guy from the label. Oh, now you're a songwriter.
Right,
I wouldn't be taken seriously.
Yeah, I get that.
Not that anybody does. But, and it was also just a cool way to kind of mess with the town and get attention. I mean, you're talking about it 20 years later, so there's something to it.
Right.
Because, most people are doing anything they can to possibly get their name on a hit single, and here's somebody obviously not. And so that's what I was doing. So it was just a stupid name I came up with instead of Jim Beavers, and just to set the tone for my so-called career. Like, I'm not going to take this too seriously, and we're going to have a little fun with it. Dirks thought it was funny.
Yeah.
And like I said, people bring that up all the time, and I only did it for a few songs. So
Well, I got to say, the interesting thing to me about that is that, well, you just segued into that, when you come in there as a songwriter, like for me, man, all you want to do is figure out a way for people to know your name. Because if you're doing well, then people are going to start coming to you with other artists and other songwriters, and and it's just so backwards to be like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Don't give them what they want, man.
So
and
that song
you'll
was
actually get further, not giving them what they want.
Yeah. So that song was
it's called "How Am I Doing?"
Yeah, and that did pretty good, right?
It did good. It was a top 5 hit for Dirks. I think it was his 3rd single.
Yeah,
and it's literally. Well, I shouldn't say literally. It figuratively saved my life, because at that point, I've been writing for a couple of years, couldn't get a publishing deal, making no money, and married, had a baby, and it was getting down to nut cutting time.
Yeah.
It was like I was applying for jobs outside the business, and about to possibly give up on it. And when that happened, and financially, it gave me a little breathing room. And it also gave me confidence to say, okay, you could do this. It happened once, it can happen again.
Yeah.
So, it's not a song of the year kind of song, but it was a hit, and my name was on it, and so it meant a whole lot to me. It always will, and it kind of gave me the confidence to keep pursuing writing.
So at that point, you've got that song; it's a single, and you're like, I might could do this. What happens next? Like, do you start paying a lot more attention to writing, or were you already writing a lot?
I was already writing a lot. I just kind of kept doing what I was doing, but I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, they finally figured out how awesome I am, and now this is how it works. You write a song or two, then you get a couple
it's
of hits.
It's a piece of cake.
Yeah,
so really,
no problem.
The way you should look at it then is if you wrote 4 or 5 songs, you had a hit on one of them, you should just write 20 songs in your life.
Right.
Have 8 or 9 number ones.
Yeah, the percentages are just like, okay, so 1 out of 4 or 5 is pretty good. So yeah, it's, a lot of times I've seen it with songwriting. Early success can be a blessing and a curse.
Right.
And, sometimes it happens to where somebody has a big hit quick and then they maybe never have another one.
Yeah.
And that messes with you too.
It does.
And I started feeling like that might be my path. I started thinking maybe I just got lucky and had a one-hit wonder situation.
Right.
It's because it was another 3 or 4 years till I had another one. So
really?
Yeah, it got a little scary there for a while.
That's crazy.
It was rough.
So what was the next one?
Next one was Watching Airplanes, Gary Allen song.
Gary Allen.
Yeah.
So I've got a little bit of a connection to that song. I know you had a little bit of success with Watching Airplanes, but what ensued from that song was a huge deal in your career. And
Big deal.
I always feel like personally that it maybe launched the next, the second half of your career. So what I'm referring to is that you may or may not remember this, but you had that song out and it was a big hit and it had been on the radio a long time, and we were going into a Subway place. Not going to name the name of it.
You're not going to name it,
but it was.
You'll say Subway, but you won't say the name of the place.
I think it might have been Jersey Mike's.
Yeah,
I was going to say Substop, but anyways, I don't know. But we're standing in line, and I said, "Hey, man," because we're always kind of going back and forth on this stuff. I said, "That song's really great." "Oh, thanks, man. I got to know, why are you washing airplanes?"
Well, hold on, washing? You thought it was washing?
I also thought it was a pair of shoes, but anyways, yeah, no, I knew better, but I thought that would be fun, and I didn't get the response from you I thought I was going to get. I thought you would just be like, yeah, that's stupid, that's not what it is. But you said, hang on, and you immediately got on your phone and you called Cletus T. Judd.
Oh, yeah.
Barry
Poole.
Barry, I got an idea. Shoot it to me, brother.
Yeah.
So I don't know where the words for the song came from, but it was.
I wrote the words.
Okay,
but it was your idea. I had never thought of that.
Well, I wrote some of the words, but anyways,
Did you get any money for that?
Well, we'll talk about that later. But Barry Poole, aka Cletus T. Judd, cut "Washing Airplanes." And it was a big hit in certain areas. And
big hit for the 7-year-olds.
So I did end up looking up the writing credits on it, and it said Jim Beavers, Jonathan Singleton, with additional credit to Chris Hennessee.
Is
real
that what it
small.
says?
It was something like that.
Really?
Yeah. So they say, though, it does take years before you do see any kind of,
That's got to be 15
money.
Years ago, but okay.
So it should have already been.
It should have hit you by now.
Man, we just spent way too much time on that topic, but it's true. Washing airplanes. Check it out.
I appreciate the idea.
Watching Airplanes was you and Jonathan Singleton, and where'd the idea come from?
The idea came. There's a couple of versions of this story. There's the one I tell when I do songwriter nights, which has some kernels of truth in it, but it's a really good story. So
never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Never. People just want to be entertained. Yeah. The real truth is, part of the truth is, I remember seeing a music video, and there's a guy sitting on the hood of his truck while an airplane goes over him.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was a haunting, cool
something
image.
to that. Yeah.
So that's first verse of the song.
Yeah. Well, that was. I loved it, man. That was a very artistic song.
I'm glad to have that one. If you're going to have these fun up tempos, it's nice to have a couple of the serious ones to balance it out.
You have fun up tempos?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, maybe we'll talk about some of those.
Well,
I'm kind of going down, looking through the list. Billy Currington.
Baby,
baby, don't.
Baby, baby, don't.
Oh, there it is. That's the vocal that sold the song. I feel like,
of course.
you and I have a little bit more connection to that record.
We did.
So Jim and I got together and wrote a song called Everything.
Earthing.
and it actually got cut, put on that record, and we were really hopeful and thinking it might be the second single or third single.
Felt like a big old hit, man.
It really did.
I thought it was a great song.
For any of you up-and-coming aspiring artists out there, there's a song on Billy Currington's record called Everything, and the record is called A Little Bit of Everything. I mean, we even kind of had the title track of the thing.
Which sometimes is a curse.
So you should go listen to it, cut it on your next record. It's a great song.
Yeah.
But you ended up having Don't on that one. The song that ended up knocking us out was
People Are Crazy.
People Are Crazy.
Probably.
Pretty good song.
I don't mind, I do, but ultimately I don't mind if a song of mine gets knocked out of contention by a great song like People Are Crazy. So I remember getting the news that People Are Crazy was going to be the single and being disappointed, but also being like, well, pretty great. It's pretty great. I don't like it when I think it's not a good song. I'm kind of like, what? Or you hear that there was some political motivation behind it or something. But if you're going to get beat out, People Are Crazy is kind of like, you can at least understand it and be like, okay, it's great. It's a great song.
It is really good. So we're going to go to Josh Turner.
Yeah.
And Why Don't We Just Dance?
Why Don't We Just Dance?
And I'm telling you, I love the song. I love the... That's so good. Man.
It's good, man.
That is catchy
the
stuff.
The old sharp 5 over the 1.
Oh, I love it.
It's that little transition chord walking up to the 4.
Yeah.
It's very distinctive.
I did get a little bit, not upset's not the right word, but when I go to look at the album credits and I see Why Don't We Just Dance, and there's no question mark at the end of it.
Yes.
The I don't know. That bothers me.
You said that to me before, and I got to say, I had never thought of that one time. And I don't know, is it common to put punctuation in song titles?
I don't know. I mean, it just makes sense to, I don't know.
It is a question, but we did not. It never entered my brain, and I don't know what the.
I don't know. The song should be recanted as far as I'm concerned.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to recant it.
So, and I kept up as these things were happening because I was knee deep in Music Row doing all the writing and all that stuff, and I was excited for you every time one of these would happen. So the next thing that I remember was Tim McGraw's song.
Yeah.
Felt Good on My Lip.
Felt good on my lippies.
Yeah,
my
and
lippy poos.
there's more to the story than just we had a song, Tim McGraw cut it, and it was, on the radio.
There is? That's really all
there is to me
it.
From a songwriter perspective because of where it came from. It didn't just come from you getting together with a person writing a song and it got cut. It was a project, right?
Yeah. So me, and as I said earlier, I have a brother who's in the business, Brett. And then there's another set of brothers that a lot of people know, Brad and Brett Warren, the Warren brothers. Great writers, great artists in their own right. And my brother had the great idea that we, 2 sets of brothers, should start writing songs together.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know those guys very well. And so we did. And we started writing, and we tried to write differently instead of just, everybody with a guitar. I would play the bass, one guy would play maybe a banjo, one guy would play guitar. So we tried to write it a little more organically, like a band or something. And Felt Good on My Lips came out of that, and Red Solo Cup came out of that too. So we had those 2 pretty big hits together.
Wait a minute, you co-wrote Red Solo Cup?
Yeah. Why are you saying that like that?
I shouldn't say that. I knew you did.
Okay.
I was just trying to sort of build it up.
Oh.
But we'll get to that song for sure. But that whole little project, the Warren Beavers,
because they were already known as the Warren Brothers.
Right.
We were the Warren Beavers.
So what's interesting to me about that is that everybody, country music fans know Felt Good on My Lips, Red Solo Cup. But it's so interesting to me as a country music fan to know that there was this record made that got passed around.
CD.
CD.
Yep.
They got passed around Music Row that said the Warren Beavers. There actually ended up being 2, right?
I think we did 3 of them. We had 2 hits off the first one. And we're like, oh, here we go. Let's keep this. So we did 2 more. We've never had another cut. So, there you go.
So the first one had Felt Good on My Lips and had Red Solo Cup. And I remember listening to that CD and just being like, oh, my gosh, man. But I will have to say, I remember getting to Red Solo Cup on that and going, that is hilarious. Jim's great in that because, you're singing on it. And you got the Warrens back there doing their background stuff.
Yeah.
But then going, ain't nobody ever going to cut that song.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah,
but it's
great, but You kind of wasted your time.
10 years after the fact, last Monday night, we were on stage at Bridgestone playing Red Solo Cup.
Bridgestone Arena in Nashville.
For the Toby Keith tribute concert.
25,000 people.
While Tyler Hubbard from FGL was singing it, we were the band. So, you never know.
It's unbelievable,
there's
man.
Just no telling where these songs will go and take you.
That's what I'm saying. Like, from a songwriter perspective, I just remember thinking, man, that is just such a great idea to do that. And that got me thinking, and I started trying these different gimmicky things on Music Row, but I feel like I kind of...
Hold on, did you say gimmicky?
Gimmicky.
Interesting choice
Okay,
of
I would
words.
like to go ahead and talk about gimmicky for a moment, because are you trying to tell me that Warren Beavers was not a gimmick?
No, I guess it had gimmick-like qualities.
Oh.
And it had a hook.
Yeah.
Right? It's the two sets of brothers writing with each other. Yeah, there was a hook to it.
You don't think that might have been a good way to get executives and artists to listen
100%. 100%. But
sounds kind of gimmicky.
Gimmick seems to cheapen it a little bit in my brain. It was just a hook. It was a reason to talk.
Let's get back together
also,
again.
kind of like a gimmick, apparently.
Sometime let's get back together and let me do some research on a word that would be more fitting,
more appropriate
than gimmick for that.
A hook is the one I would use. We had a hook.
Yeah, it's a pretty gimmicky hook. But so I was thinking,
gimmicky would be me wearing a eye patch and dancing around singing like a pirate. That's a gimmick.
All right, so let me ask you if you think this is a gimmick. And I heard this is true, but I never saw it, so can't confirm this. But that Waylon Jennings would go into I don't guess it would have been the record label executive or anything. It was probably a what do you call the guys that used to put the songs on, like they playlist the songs on the radio, right?
A program director?
Program director. You know those well.
Do you think, can I interrupt you real quick? Do you think Willie Nelson's pigtails and headband are a gimmick? Would you call it a gimmick?
I think that was just Willie being Willie, wouldn't you?
Would you call it a gimmick?
No, I wouldn't. No.
Okay. I'm wondering where gimmick fits on your spectrum of acceptable.
Like I said, let's just we'll need
to
do.
The Beatles mop top haircut's a gimmick.
No, I guess not. That was just the Beatles being the Beatles.
It's an interesting question, but almost all the big artists had something. Either I would always say either a look or a hook, right? Hopefully both. An unusual name with an unusual look, and then some hit songs, and then you kind of got the recipe.
You know what? I think at this point in our conversation, I'm going to have to tell you I'm very sorry that I said the word gimmick.
It's not even I'm offended. I'm just wondering. The word gimmick is interesting.
I shouldn't have said gimmick. I'm really sorry.
I'm offended now.
You know what it was? I figured out how to replace the word.
What?
With genius.
Oh, that sounds better.
Songwriting genius.
I interrupted you. Let's go back to what you were saying.
Waylon Jennings would walk into the program directors, and they were the ones that decided which songs to put out and how many times to spin them. And he would bring in the 45, the record that was the little record.
45 RPM.
Yeah, had two
vinyl
sides.
record.
Yeah. Or he would also, on the other hand, have a 45 caliber pistol, and he would lay it on the desk and say, "Which one's it going to be, Hoss?" Did you ever hear that story?
No,
that's
but I
pretty
love it.
great.
I love it.
So the reason I bring that up is that would you consider this a gimmick?
I would consider that a gimmick.
That?
Yeah.
Then would you consider this a gimmick? Jim Beavers walking in with a CD of songs he had just cut, demoed with a oven mitt on, holding it.
Did this happen?
Did you tell me?
Okay, that's a gimmick. And yes, I did that.
So when happen.
For a while, when I would turn in back then you would make you write your songs, you do your demos, you burn them to a CD, and then you turn them into your publisher. So when I would turn in my CDs, I would make a big production. I'd walk in the room, I would put on a huge oven mitt, and then I would retrieve the CDs from a backpack.
Yes.
And
because it was hot.
Because they were so hot, too hot to handle. And then along the same lines, one time I passed out diapers to everybody.
Yeah.
And I said, you might want to put these on before you
I think I get where you're
before you listen to these songs, because you're gonna when you hear them. So those are gimmicks, and I do love a good gimmick. But again, dude, Rider X, those are all gimmicks. And I admit they're gimmicks, but
Warren Beavers was not.
They get your attention.
They do.
That's the whole thing. They're sticky. They get your attention.
Yeah.
They make you have this much effort to care about something that's about to happen.
Well, doesn't that kind of filter into songwriting as well, right? It's the same thing as coming up with a musical hook or just a lyrical hook.
Anything to get attention. I mean, everybody's attention spans are just shorter than they've ever been, and we've got thousands of things clamoring for our, attention. Anything to get your attention, whether it's a weird little sound, a little, I don't know. Yeah, of course.
Like, for instance, 5150.
Yeah, that's
somebody
hooky.
call the That's
just
pretty,
hooky.
Yeah.
I'd call that hooky.
Yeah.
Nursery rhyme, hook.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, which is another song you were a part of.
Dirks disavows that song. He likes to make, every time we play a little acoustic show together, he will do the longest intro of how he got stuck with this song, and he'll blame me for the song, and he does all this stuff, trying to distance himself from it.
How would he do that? I don't understand.
But I don't know.
It's so gimmicky.
I think in his mind he thinks it's silly, and some of it is silly, maybe to some people. But it's not silly too.
Yeah.
The double platinum 3-week number one,
It's pretty
and
good.
every night when he plays it, people go crazy. It's
do.
not silly to them.
They love it.
So sometimes people take themselves a little too seriously.
Yeah. Well,
I
I know what you mean.
I think you do too.
I take myself a little too
No, you
seriously
don't.
from time to time. Let's talk about Luke Bryan. So just within the last, we're kind of chronologically working through your song list here, but Drink a Beer.
Drink a beer.
Where did that come from?
Where did it come from?
That's a pretty simple line.
Very simple line. And again, that was intentional misdirection, right? I wanted to, I can't say it was a grand design, but I liked the fact that the title was very misleading. And if you just saw the title, you go, okay, here comes another beer drinking
Party song, yeah, tailgates. And
then you write it about a very, very serious subject matter. To me, that's the craft of writing.
Yeah.
And it's misdirection. And I really love that song because it is very crafty, not only just the title and the song, but the way I wrote it with Chris Stapleton. And a lot of people didn't even understand the hook of that song. The reason why the guy's drinking beer out on the pier is because that's what he used to do with the person that just died.
Yeah.
And if you don't pay attention, you don't realize it. The people still liked it, but then I'd have so many people come up and go, man, and they kind of missed the whole point of it. But that's okay too. So
Stapleton, so you show up with this, hey man, I got this sort of thought or idea, and I've thought it was interesting too that there's that breath. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So
that I had the chorus, and I didn't at the time know what the song was going to be about because there's nothing in the chorus about why he's doing it.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know where it came from. It just hit me, And so I played it. I said, man, I got this chorus. I was writing with Chris one day, and I played it for him. He just kind of looked at me, he laughed. I said, do you think it's a funny song or something? He goes, no. He goes, you waited so long to say the title.
Yeah.
I was like, I did, but I kind of like it. He said, I like it too. I'm not saying it's wrong. He said, you just don't hear that much. A lot of people now are just trying to cram a word into every space. Yeah. And you're a funny guy. I'm a funny guy. I study comedians. I like writing jokes. And, everybody knows that, half the success of a humorous delivery is the timing.
Yeah.
And so I pay a lot of attention to that with the lyrics. And if there's something special to do with the timing of a song, especially on the title of it, then you should do it, to make it stand out.
Simplicity. And
Simple.
there's a lot of simplicity and openness, open air.
100%.
Remember when we wrote everything, you remember the first thing that got us started on it? Of course, I'm not trying to compare that to these songs, but I remember the day that we go, blom, blom, blom. So easy,
Just
but
memorable.
It sticks in your head.
100%.
That's a great song.
Yeah.
But that does open up. The next thing is you're talking about Stapleton, who's done decent for himself.
He's doing all right.
He's doing okay. So really the last song I want to talk about is something that you were a part of. It means a lot to me, and here's why. When I think of it's country music, and I think of like the the mecca of country music. For me, it's Wanted, the Outlaws, which was the first platinum, right? That was the first million album. Right. So there you go.
You're a big Tom Paul Glaser fan, I can tell.
Tom Paul, well, hey, man, put another log on the fire. Check it out. There was a couple other guys on that record, too, but there was Tom Paul and Jesse, yeah.
Waylon
and then
and
some other. Oh, yeah, Waylon and Willie.
Never heard of them.
But Redheaded Stranger, to me, kind of feels like that.
You talk about seminal country albums?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and then, like we've talked a little bit about it before, maybe like No Fences, the Garth record, and then we could list a bunch
I'd say
of
Guitar Town, Steve Earle, Hillbilly Deluxe, Dwight Yoakam.
Oh, man.
Storms of Life, Randy Travis, Killing Time, Clint Black.
Yep. Those kind of records. And then if we dig back over the last 10 years, we could name a few. I'm sure it's personal preference, but I feel like Traveler is, since Wanted, the Outlaws is the one. Like it's the pinnacle as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that would agree with that. First of all, the artist being Stapleton is just he transcends time, it seems like.
Transcends genre too.
He does do that.
That album is so big because people who would never buy a country record bought that record,
Yes, that's exactly right. So the reason that I bring that up is that, man, all the hits and all of the commercial success and all that stuff, if I could, like you did, have a song on that record, man, I would feel like I had really done something.
You would rather have a album cut on Traveler than a 6-week number one on a forgotten artist? It was a hit. Would you rather have an album cut on Traveler or have written Achy Breaky Heart?
So here's the thing.
Or have written Achy Breaky Heart.
If you would have, you went there.
I did.
That's a tough one.
No, it's not. Not for me.
It's not. The answer to the first question, well, that brings up a good point. The answer to the first question, 6-week number one on an artist that disappeared, or that song, I'm going to take album cut on Chris Stapleton record, because I'm very happy financially with my life. All the stuff, man. I mean, I don't have all the stuff in the world, but I'm extremely blessed and happy with what I got, and that would be really cool. Well, I know.
You're hooked on and I understand this.
Yeah.
And a lot of writers have I want to be cool, I want to be respected, I want the critics to like me, a lot of artists too. And I get that. But you're saying you would rather have an album cut that was not a single or a hit on Chris Stapleton Traveler than have written Achy Breaky Heart.
First of all, I want to quote a very famous quote. I don't want Jim Beavers quote. Say it, because I'll mess it up.
It was a joke.
It was a joke.
I don't want to be good. I want to be successful. That quote is about how the bad stuff often is successful.
You ended up being both, buddy.
Would you?
Congratulations. But back to the original question.
Sometimes you play writers' nights, and people will almost, very frequently people will say, "Is there a song? What's your favorite song of yours that you wish you'd written?"
Right.
And usually somebody will say, "Oh, Yesterday by the Beatles," which I agree. I wish I wrote Yesterday, but I will almost always say, "Happy Birthday."
Yeah,
I wish I wrote Happy Birthday.
Which would be public domain.
And they all laugh, and I say, I'm serious. Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
It cuts across cultures and time and everything, and it's kind of like, I had to deal with this with Red Solo Cup. Red Solo Cup, admittedly, is a kind of a stupid, fun, quirky, weird. A lot of serious songwriters did not like it, were pissed off that it was a hit. But man, at the end of the day, that song affected, for whatever you want to call it, maybe that's not the right word, a lot of people. They all know it. And they have an opinion on it, right? They either love it. When I do a writer's night, I'll say, according to my research, half of you hate this song. Yeah. And half of you love this song.
Right.
But all of you know
Everybody knows it.
And there's something to be said for that. There's something that's not easy to do.
Right.
That's not. It's easy to preach to the choir. It's hard to get everybody on the same wavelength for 3 minutes. So, it just really is.
This will be fun. So this show's pretty new, and I haven't tried this before. But I'd like to do this as a poll to the listeners.
You gonna do a poll?
Yes.
All right.
Would you rather have written "Achy Breaky Heart" or an album cut, specifically Parachute,
Parachute
on Chris Stapleton's
Interesting
record? So there's the poll. My answer, I'll tell it later.
I know what your answer is.
Okay.
You'd rather have written Parachute, and I get it, but and you're not wrong, right? That says to you that album and that artist to you is elevated in your brain creatively, artistically, and it's who you would aspire. It's aspirational. That's how I see myself, and that's fine, and that's good. And then some people are just mercenaries, like say, Achy Breaky Heart was a massive hit on a 9 million selling album.
Unbelievable.
People today, 34 years later, still know that song, and that's what they like about it. So who's to say, man?
Well, I will say this, though, in comparison to the Outlaws record, which I love, and I'm sure it's the first million sellers, sold a lot more since then.
Yeah.
But Put Another Log on the Fire, that's a fun song.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go with something off of Traveler before I'm going to go with Put Another Log
Put Another Log on the Fire.
That's just a personal
I know that
thing.
song, but I doubt very many people listening know Put Another Log.
But I'll bet you that
Cook me up some bacon and some beans.
I'm going to guarantee you, though, that most of the people listening to us talk right now know Parachute. Where in the world, where'd that come from? And I will say this before you answer. As I looked through the song list of that record, and I knew, let's say they said, hey, by the way, Jim Beavers wrote one of these songs, I would pick Parachute and go, that's it. And
I wonder why.
If you ask me why, you just did. It's because that is a very unique title.
Yeah.
And I would look at that and go, how in the world are you going to write a song called Parachute before I hear it,
Yeah.
So that's why I would say that.
Well, I wish I could say that I had that idea and that I was just walking around with it waiting on the right day to write it. But sometimes that's how it works. And sometimes just a great idea happens in the room. And that one literally happened in the room. I had that chord progression and that up-tempo stompy vibe.
Yeah.
And I said, man, I got this music and I really like it. It's an unusual chord progression for country. It's a 6-1-5-4.
6-1-5-4.
6 minor 1-5-4.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard it in a long time. I also, mercenary wise, I knew Chris was going to make a record. I didn't know it was going to be Traveler.
Yeah.
But I also, we all know as writers, some of the hardest things to write are up-tempo songs. Mm-hmm. And so I just knew, he's such a soulful guy and he can get away with singing anything because he's so great that it's easy to slip into just this mid-tempo ballad to where all the songs are in the same area. So I knew he was going to need an up-tempo. So I was trying to find something that sounded cool but stompy, up-tempo-y.
Yeah.
So I just played him that progression. And I had a little drum loop going, and he's kind of looked at me, and I've never had this happen before. He goes, man, I had a dream last night. And I think what I dreamed might work over that. And I was like, what? He goes, yeah. And so his dream was you only need a roof when it's raining. You only need a fire when it's cold. And so that's all he had. And that's all we had. We didn't have Parachute.
Yeah.
And then I said, you only need a drink when the whiskey's the only thing you have left to hold. So I knew we had a blueprint for the chorus. Uh-huh. And we just got, how sometimes as a writer, you write yourself into a corner.
Oh, yeah.
And we had no idea where we're going, which I hate working like that because I got to know what the target is.
Right.
I just have to know what I'm writing toward. But I don't remember who somebody said, what about Parachute? Because it's something that helps people if they're falling.
Right.
It helps them, it saves them, and I was like, I remember going, I can't believe I've never heard a song called Parachute. There probably have been. But I just remember, I cannot believe there hadn't been a song called Parachute.
I don't know.
And Stapleton's a pretty fearless writer. He's like, oh, it sounds good to me. He doesn't question anything.
Yeah.
He's like, if it feels right, he goes, whereas I'm real cerebral and analytical. And thankfully, he was singing it. Otherwise, I don't know. Nobody would have ever heard that song.
I get it.
But he was singing it. So,
and one of my favorite lines of any song, and it's in that one, is, sun comes up, goes back down, falling feels like flying till you hit the ground.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not groundbreaking as far as like the idea, but the way that it's worded is so cool, man.
I fought him on sun comes up and goes back down. I was like, why are we saying that? What's that mean?
Right.
I mean, I understand the falling feels like flying. Well, but he was like, it just sounds good. And I had to go.
When he sings it,
it does sound really good, but it means nothing to me.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
I like everything to make sense.
Right.
The falling is what led us into the word parachute.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right. That's how we got that word.
So did somebody you may not remember, but did somebody say falling feels like flying?
I think so. I think he may have said that, and I said, "Oh, like a parachute or something." I said we could call it parachute, but remember us going, "God, what do you rhyme with parachute?" And then we just said, "Let's just don't rhyme it," and that's what happened. And when you go back and listen to it, you want to think somebody had a grand plan, but sometimes you're just vibing, and we were vibing.
Man, that's well. Yeah, I mean, I love it, man.
Yeah.
That record, so great.
For a long time in Writers Night, I just never played that song. I mean, it was a hit, but wasn't like a big 4-week number one.
Here's what's weird about that Stapleton record is that I know the whole record. I don't know what songs were singles and what weren't.
Well, yeah, so I was like, for a while, I didn't play it. I was playing a deal with the Warren Brothers, and I was like, man, should I play that Stapleton song? They're like, are you saying you don't play it? I was like, I've never done it before. And they're like, it's a Chris Stapleton song. You should play it. And I was like, yeah, but I think it only got to number 15 or something. Yeah. They're like, everybody's going to know that song, and it makes you look cool that you have a Chris Stapleton song. I was like, oh, really? And they're like, just play it. And so now I play it all the time.
Well, obviously, I love it.
Yeah.
All right, so Fully Armed, I've asked you.
Fully Armed.
Yes. Oh, man. Easy now. I asked you to share with me a Bible verse that arms you.
Yes.
And then, to talk about how faith has been, played a role in your music career, songwriting.
Faith Hill?
Faith. Did you have any cuts?
I had a Faith Hill
cut there you
one
go.
time.
So that's how faith has played a role. Huh.
A very minor role.
If I ever do get Tim on here, I'll have to remember that to not ask that question so vaguely like that.
No, I like it. No, I knew the faith you were talking about.
Give me a Bible verse.
Jesus wept.
That's it.
That's a Bible verse. You said give one to you.
Okay, that's the shortest.
I think so. And I didn't want to be a smart aleck today, but
did you grow up?
Yes,
you did.
I did. Yes, I did.
All right, so I ask you to tell me a Bible verse, and
I said Jesus wept.
And we'll discuss that Jesus wept is a Bible verse.
That is a Bible verse. That's a complete short 2-word Bible verse.
Which Bible verse do you feel like arms you or had throughout the years been something that you find yourself going back to?
The one I sent you, and the first one that popped into my brain was Matthew 6:34.
Mm-hmm.
And it's therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. It's about worrying.
Amen.
Amen.
Do you find that you find yourself worrying every once in a while?
I am naturally a worrier and kind of have been my whole life. Of course, I was an adult before I kind of realized that was my natural state and that it didn't have to be.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I don't still.
Right.
But I do a lot less than I used to, especially as it was related to career stuff.
Yeah.
Am I in the right job? Am I making enough money? Am I ever going to get a hit? Am I going to ever get another hit? Am I going to be able to pay for my kids to go to college? Just a lot of worrying, and it's kind of my natural state.
I get it.
Yeah.
And, I mean,
you don't seem like a worrier to me.
Oh, are you kidding?
I
don't know a lot of people that don't spend some
My
time
wife
worrying.
doesn't. My wife doesn't worry.
Miss Rachel?
Yes.
You feel like she really just doesn't worry about stuff?
She might worry about something with our kids if they've given her a reason to.
Yeah. Mom's going to worry about their kid.
Maybe, but even worry about it be the real. There's concern, but I'm talking about she doesn't. She's got a good natural stoic. Only focus on what you can control, and she's always said, even before I had that kind of language, she'd be like, "Well, there's nothing I can do about it anyway," and I'd be like, "Oh, what do you mean?
Right.
What if this happens and that?" And,
don't worry about stuff you can't do anything about.
Yeah, and and so I remember my dad saying, that effectively, why worry about things you can't control? And then, like I've always heard, worrying is like wishing for what you don't want. That meant a lot to me when I read that phrase. I was like, that's right. And then you get old enough to where you start realizing if you kept a worry journal, which I never did.
That's interesting. Yeah.
If you did, you would go back, and I promise you 90% of the things you worried about never happened. and think of all that wasted negative energy. And sometimes things you never could have thought would happened. You could even imagine them, good things, and sometimes bad things. Yeah. So it's pointless. And in the scope of Christianity, it's especially pointless because if we live on faith, then why are we worried about the future or tomorrow or being provided for, or are we going to get what we want and those kind of things?
And I feel like from a songwriter or an artist, music person, worrying about what other people think is a huge deal because so much of your career is based off of that.
I worry a lot about what people think about me, too much. But like I said, thankfully, I believe the older I've gotten, the more at least I'm aware of it, and I can mindfully stop myself sometimes. Right. But it's always there. But too much, I would care about that.
I can relate so well, man. Back when we, remember you produced some stuff on me and we had a developmental deal and we were doing some stuff and had some business worries going on. And man, I got into this really weird place. And I remember specifically finally having a moment where I go, man, the things I'm worrying about are ruining my days and they may or most likely never would happen, whatever it might have been. And it really hit me. It's like, man, we spend time messing up today, worried about tomorrow, bam, right back to this Bible verse. So I feel like to put it into perspective, I'm going to go up to verse 25. So it's Matthew 6, verse 25. And it's Jesus. This is the Sermon on the Mount. So this is kind of like, this is a big moment for him, I guess, for Christianity, because this is sort of the first sermon, to my knowledge. If I'm wrong on that, tell me. But the first sermon where he gets everybody, gathers them around and says, all right, here's the deal.
Here's the deal.
The Beatitudes and all this stuff. And so Matthew 6:25 says, therefore I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you'll eat or what you'll drink, or about your body, what you'll wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than the clothes? Verse 26. Look at the birds. I love this. Look at the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? I love that. 27. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single day to your life? So
that's a good one.
How about that? So,
that says
boy, I'm worried about what's going to happen next month, and then it just doesn't make sense. So 28, it says, and why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is there today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, ye of little faith?
Oh, ye of little faith.
That's the King James version that came out in me. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all of these things.
I don't remember so much focus being on the clothing.
Yeah, that's nice. There it is, yeah. And your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you. And then, therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Mm-hmm. So, putting that into perspective, worrying, just don't worry. And I thought about this too as I'm thinking about who he's speaking to in this sermon. It doesn't really seem like he's talking to rich folks,
No, he's talking about food and
these people gathered around are like, man, we got to worry about what we're going to eat and what we're going to wear.
I've never had to worry about was I going to have food.
Well,
Think about that. And a lot of people do.
How about that?
Now.
I know.
That's a different level. That seems justifiable.
Yeah.
Almost. Compared to the stupid stuff I worry about.
You and I have talked a little bit, and he'll be a guest someday, but Kurt Campbell, good friend of yours, and Men of Valor. Mm-hmm. And I've looked into that, and I'm thinking about these guys, and it's prison ministries. And these guys that are in prison, it reminds me of this situation where they're just worried about surviving this next
their
day.
Worries seem a little more, basic and instinctive.
It leads me to that verse that says, it's easier for the camel to go through the eye of the needle than a rich man to find heaven. It kind of puts it into perspective. Not that it's not possible, of course, but we get so sidetracked in all this other stuff and what we worry about. Are we going to have another hit? Are we going to have another cut? Are we going to have enough money to buy the next vehicle or whatever it is. And man, he's talking to these people that they just need to eat, drink, and find shelter. So I wrote this down, if you don't mind me reading it, after having read what you sent. I said, when you sent me your verse, I went back over the Sermon on the Mount, and it seems like a person could almost read these verses and base their entire life game plan on that message. This particular chapter and these verses are so important to me because I find myself worrying so often. It's easy as a musician, especially a songwriter, because as soon as you get one cut or a single, you start to worry about the next cut and the next single. You forget, what had happened before. And he doesn't say, don't worry, I'll make sure you have another hit. He says, don't worry, follow me, and I'll make sure you have food, water, and clothes, and the joy and peace that comes from him. It seems to me that nothing else really matters. We worry because we focus our attention on the earthly treasures like money, houses, cars, hits, reputation, what people think about us, right? We worry about these things because they're not of him, because we know they can be stolen, burned, died, killed, whatever it might be, or just fade away. But if we follow him, the only things we need to worry about is food, water, and shelter. And he says,
don't even worry about those.
Don't worry about those. I got you. So earthly treasures will fade away, but his love endures forever. Reputation.
Man. Yeah.
Especially on Music Row, man, and in the business.
I mean, yeah. We wouldn't be in this business unless we thought somebody wanted to hear something we had to say, which is very telling of the kind of people that this business attracts. And reputation, what other people think about you.
Yeah. Well, it attracted us, and young versions of us.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed hope, and it's a very fraction of wisdom, but growing in wisdom as I've gotten older in this business and realizing how much self there is involved in trying to be.
So much.
It's,
everybody's heard some version of this. We wouldn't worry so much about what people think about us if we knew how seldomly they did.
Yeah.
And it's a fact. And that's another phrase that really crystallized that line of thinking for me. And again, it's all about me, all this stuff. And if your biggest worry is your reputation, then I hope you understand how absolutely privileged you are for that to be
to
top
even be
of your
in
mind.
your mind.
Yeah, and
really,
and again, so a self-awareness is a big thing that I work on, and I hope that I've gotten better as I've gotten older. And
it seems to me that in our conversation, it kind of comes up that understanding it, realizing it is the first step.
Yep.
It kind of sounds like recovery. Right?
You got to know there's a problem. You got to admit there's a problem.
And to be able to step back and go, wait a minute, I worry. What am I? Then you can. So there's a symptom. Let's get down to the core of the problem. What am I worried about? Well, if you read that verse, he says, don't worry about anything. And the only things that he really in this verse is saying that should even cross your mind to worry about food, shelter, clothes.
Yeah.
And so, so I think it's interesting to be able to point out that once you acknowledge that you are a worrier, that you do have things to worry about, then you can find a kind of focus on what it is that you're worried about and realize they come from him, because there's a good chance they don't. So
mostly never they come from him, Yeah, you're right.
Mostly never. Will you come on here and talk to me again sometime?
No.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. I like honesty. If you were to have, though, we would really be able to cover what was the word we got hung up on earlier?
Gimmicky.
Yeah.
Gimmicky carries a negative connotation.
So I'm going to study a little bit more and try to come up, because I feel like
go to Thethorith.com.
Thethorith?
Yeah.
I do feel like that I threw out genius a little too liberally.
You were too
earlier.
easy with genius?
I did, man. So the next time when we do this again, part 2, then we'll come up with a better name for
I will come back
gimmicky.
if anybody wants me to. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But it's been fun to be inside the armored car.
Man.
And to talk about being fully armed.
I appreciate it. And we tell the stories, therefore, to be able to lead us up to the scripture and to understand how that kind of stuff filters into our lives and into our careers. And I thank you. I thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, my friend.
Jim
Thank
Beavers.
you for having me.
Until the next time I see you guys, open up your Bible, put on your armor, fully armed. Well, there you go, guys. Jim Beavers, my pal, my compadre. Appreciate him coming on the show and telling us stories about where these songs come from, the inspiration. It's just great. I mean, and those songs, man, even Red Solo Cup, like he said, you either love it or you hate it, but you know it. But I appreciate him bringing Matthew chapter 6, verse 34 in. And I mean, it does not get simpler than this. I mean, therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. That's good stuff right there. And that's Jesus talking. So when he talks, we need to listen. Thanks again, Jim Beavers. We'll see you next time on Fully Armed. God bless you.